Hello there, this is AD Robles, and you're listening to AD on the Fight, Laugh, Feast Network. All right. Well, today I just wanted to let you know up front that if my eyes or my face looks a little puffy, it's first thing in the morning. I've been thinking about this episode for the last hour or so, and so I just woke up a little while ago. You might be also thinking, most of you listen on the podcast, and you're thinking, well, why would he tell me what he looks like? I'm listening on a podcast. Well, I'm also going to upload this this audio to a video on my YouTube channel. If you didn't know about my YouTube channel, go ahead and check it out. Search AD Robles, ADROBLES. Go ahead and subscribe, please. If you're a podcast listener, subscribe to my YouTube channel. I have a short-term mission to have a larger YouTube channel than Dr. Russell Moore. I am very close. I've got about 3,000 subscribers. He's got almost 4,000 subscribers. So go to YouTube, AD Robles. There's a ton of great content there. I've got over 350 videos. There's hilarious videos. There's serious videos. There's things that I do some fancy editing and things like that. It's all a lot of fun. So please go ahead and check out the YouTube channel today. And consider, if you like my content, consider subscribing, ADROBLES, on YouTube. Let's jump right in. What I'm planning on doing today is I'm planning on making the case that you should stop keeping the peace. In the next 20 minutes, I'm hoping to convince you that one of the things that you should stop doing is keeping the peace at all costs. Now, that might be a weird thing for a Christian to say, and I'm going to use a couple of examples here. I'm primarily talking about the happening over at the Reform Pub Facebook group. Now, this is a relatively unimportant thing. It's a fairly large group, but it's still just a Facebook group, right? So it's not the end of the world. But what they did by banning any mention of Doug Wilson's name, along with other things, there's other things that are banned over there as well as far as topics of conversation. What they did was set a precedent that a Christian should not accept. A Christian should not be the kind of person that just wants to keep the peace at all costs. Let me explain to you what I mean. Now, you might say, that's weird, Adam. That's weird, because I can think of verses in the Bible that talk about how you should keep the peace. So what kind of evil nonsense are you talking about here? Well, let me sit tight. Just bear with me for just a minute. I could come up with those verses too. There's one in the Sermon on the Mount, in the Beatitudes, where Jesus says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." You want to be a child of God, correct? So then why is AD telling you not to be a peacemaker when Jesus said, "Blessed are the peacemakers"? There's another verse as well that talks about peace from the lips of Jesus as well, and it's from almost the same context. Matthew chapter 10, only 5 chapters later. What does he say? It's interesting. He says, "Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against his mother, and a daughter-in-law against his mother-in-law, and a person's enemies will be those of his own household." I remember this pairing of verses very well. This is one of those pairings of verses that atheists love. They say, "Oh, look, there's a contradiction. Jesus couldn't be God because he said, 'Blessed are the peacemakers,' and then he said that he didn't even come to bring peace." And so what do we do, right? What do we do about this kind of thing? Because as a Christian, we're committed to believe every verse in the Bible. We're committed to number one, assume that Jesus Christ is God. We need to believe that's one of our presuppositions. Jesus Christ is the Lord of glory. And the Lord of glory cannot contradict himself. He cannot lie. He cannot be one thing and then he can't be not that thing. I mean, he is who he is. I am the great I am. You know what I mean? So we need to understand these verses. We're committed to believing them. We need to be able to understand them in a way that make them not contradict. And luckily, well, this is not luck. This is because God is amazing. He doesn't just leave us twisting in the wind. God never leaves you twisting in the wind with this kind of stuff. So when atheists bring up this kind of stuff, these contradictions, stuff like that, don't fear it. I used to fear that stuff, but you don't have to. He gives us a little explanation here. This is actually from Paul. This is from Romans chapter 18, again, it's talking about peace. And what does Paul say? He says, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. If it's possible, as much as it lies in you, live peaceably with all men, the King James says. And so you see the caveat here, right? It's not peace at all costs. Rather, as long as if it's possible, as long as it depends on you, be at peace with all men. Be a peacemaker, but not peace at all costs. Sometimes it doesn't depend on you. Sometimes it doesn't depend on you, and you can't be peaceful in certain situations. I can think of many situations like this. And when you think about Christ himself, he came to bring a sword. And the reason he came to bring a sword is because it was not possible for him to come and be at peace with all men, because he had and has real enemies on this earth. Real enemies that want nothing more than to usurp God's authority. Real enemies that want to destroy his image bearers. And he came to save the world. And he came, essentially, to conquer his foes. He's putting all his enemies under his feet. That's going to be a violent situation. That's not going to be peaceful. It'll be peaceful when everything is put right, when the final enemy, when death is put under his feet, then it'll be peaceful. But for right now, there's not just peace. I mean, the Church of God has peace. We understand that. We have peace with God, and we're so grateful for it. But at the same time, we look around, and it's not just all, daffodils and daisies and little puppies and stuff like that. That's just not the reality it is. So there is violence as well, and there's a battle. I'm going to assume, I'm not going to make the case in this video, but I'm going to make this case soon, because I talk to a lot of people that say, well, there is no culture war. I'm just a Christian. I'm not engaged in a culture war. And I'm like, what Bible are you reading? I mean, the Bible presents what we do here as a war all the time. There's a great verse in Psalm 144 when it's like, praise the Lord, or bless the Lord. He's the one who prepares me for war, who trains my fingers for battle, and things like that. And so much of what we're doing in the church, is preparing for battle. Preparing, understanding what God is like, understanding what God desires from us, but not just so that we know more about God. Yes, it's great to know a lot more about God. That's wonderful. Nothing wrong with that. But we do it so that we're prepared to act for the Lord. That's actually one of my favorite R.J. Rushdoony quotes. It's not that we go to church and pray and study so that we just have the knowledge and we can say we did our duty. No, we do it so that we know what God would do in situations, and so that when we face those situations, when we're ready for that battle, we're ready because we've done our prep work. We've done our preparation. This is interesting because I'm going to relate. I ripped two things last week that people go too far with, and it's very unmanly of them to go too far with. And I ripped video games. It's very popular to rip video games, right? I play video games, so don't hear me saying video games are bad, but we all know that you can go too far with video games, right? So video games and sports, these are two things that men go way too far with. And I made the case that it's just it's an attempt at replacing the real work that you should be doing, doing work in these video games, because a lot of these video games are they're like all consuming, like you build stuff and things like that. I mentioned World of Warcraft. I used to play World of Warcraft. And World of Warcraft is cool because it has different things that you can do. You can play it by yourself, but it's really meant to be played with others. And they have these big levels, essentially, where you basically have to work together. Otherwise, you can't beat it. Like, there's no way for you to beat it on your own. You have to go in with a team of 5 or 10 or something like that. But not only do you have to do that, but you have to do it with 5 or 10 people that have different jobs, different functions. There's things called healers, right? That's what I used to be, a healer. And a healer, as you might imagine, that person's job is really not to fight the enemies, although they can fight. They have weapons. But they're focused on making sure the whole party is healed up, because they're facing these enemies that are more powerful than they are, and they're gonna die in the game unless the healer is doing his healing job. That's what I used to do. I used to be a healer. And I'd get involved in the fight every now and then, but mostly I'm trying to avoid it so that I can use healing powers on my team, right? There's also DPS is what it's called. These are essentially the fighters. These are the guys that are just trying to do as much damage as they possibly can to the enemy so that they can win. That's their whole job. They don't focus on anything else except damage. They just want to do damage. And then they've got these guys called tanks. And these I never played as a tank because it always seemed like too much pressure. But a tank essentially is a very powerful guy. He fights, but his whole job is really to draw as much fire to himself as possible so that the healer doesn't get hurt by the enemies. He's supposed to draw as much aggression from the enemy as possible. So he's almost like a distracting guy. He takes fire for people. He's cover fire. So that way the damage guys and the healers can do their thing. Meanwhile, he's just taking all the brunt of the attacks, right? He's beefy, he's strong, and he does that. And so you need to really work together in the World of Warcraft, and everyone has a different function, right? Everyone has a different function. And, another thing that works this way is a football team. I'm a Jets fan, and I used to be really into it. I used to go way too far with being a Jets fan. Anyway, we have a new head coach. His name is Adam Gase. And Adam Gase is the worst. He's the worst. And it's not just because the team is losing. The team is losing because of him. He's a professional excuse maker. Nobody likes it when someone's basically why did you lose this game? And you're given excuses. You don't have the right quarterback, or you don't have the right offensive line. You don't have the right players and things like that. You don't see winners doing that stuff. What you see winners do, what you see winners doing is you see winners saying, all right, well, I don't have the right players, so let me figure out the best position to put these not right players in a situation where they can be successful. So if I don't have a great thrower, I'm not going to throw the ball a ton. Or I'm going to do gadget plays where they don't have to throw the ball as far or as accurately, things like that. Like that's what a winner does. But a loser just tries to blame everyone. I don't have the right pieces. And I see the church very much in a way like this, where look, these are the people, the people that are in the church. This is who we got. This is our army, right? This is our army. And so we need to do what we have to do with this army and stop wishing we had another army. That's what we really need to do. And so I see the church in this way. Everyone has its own role. In fact, that's a verse that lots of people love to quote. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 12, I believe. Just as the body is one, it has many members, and all members of the body, though are many, are one body, so it is with Christ. For one in the Spirit, we're all baptized into one body, Jews or Greeks, slaves or free, we're all made to drink of one Spirit. It goes on later. The eye can't say to the hand, I have no need of you, nor again the head to the feet, I have no need of you. On the contrary, the parts of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable, and those parts of the body that we think are less honorable bestow greater honor. So this is making the case, essentially, of what I was explaining with World of Warcraft. Everyone has a different role. They're not the same role. A healer can't be a tank. A tank can't be a healer. You know what I mean? And so the reality is that the church is in a war, is in a battle, and does have an army. And we need to use this army. And guys, this is why I was up this morning early, because this is a problem I see all over the place, right? Where, this is really how stupid it gets sometimes. Where basically hands are saying, you're not a hand like me, therefore you must be a capitulator. You must be part of the enemy. Or we have ears saying, well, you're not an ear like me, therefore you must be unloving. And it just drives me up the wall. It really does. It really does. I see this with people that look like not everyone has to have a YouTube channel. Not everyone has to be brash. Not everyone has to say things in a no quarter November kind of way. That's not what we're looking for. But just because somebody's a little bit more winsome than you, or doesn't maybe identify the enemies as aggressively as you, does not mean they're on the other team. Right? Like everyone has a different role. I was reading the story of David and Goliath to my son. And it's such an interesting story because we have the fighters, right? We've got the warrior class. We've got the people that are supposed to be up in the front lines, doing battle, getting bloody, maybe making mistakes, but they're facing the brunt of the assault. And then we have David, right? And he's not really part of the army, but he has a role right? He's bringing the food to his brothers. He's doing something. And in a military, you have different people doing different things. You've got snipers. You've got people in the foxholes. You've got people in tanks. You've got, medics. You've got intelligence officers. You've got spies. You've got, there's all kinds of different roles in a war, right? And obviously, a spy is not going to go out into the big of the battlefield, stick out his chest, and say, okay, let's go. That's a role for somebody else. A spy can't do that. In fact, a spy would be breaking would be abandoning his post if he were to do something like that, right? And so this is the thing about the Facebook thing, right? Because I noticed that I asked the question in the group about what's banned, because I knew there was other things banned. So Doug Wilson, he's banned because they're trying to keep the peace. The threads about him are too polarizing. Vaccines and anti-vaccine, that's banned. Marijuana, drug legalization, that's bad. Birth control and vasectomies, that's bad. The question on whether or not a woman should have children, I can't think of a more basic Christian question, but that's banned. Medical questions are banned. Any article by Pulpit and Pen is deleted. And so what are these people attempting to do here, right? What are the admins of this group attempting to do? Well, one of the things they're attempting, there's a variety of things, and they said so in the initial post. There's a variety of reasons we're banning Doug Wilson, but the primary one seems to be, at least what they're going with, is they're trying to keep the peace. It's just too much moderation required, right? It's too much moderation required, and to me that's a real tragedy, because here's the thing, guys. When we're fighting with each other, right? When we're fighting with each other and we're kicking around these ideas that are controversial and things like that, like vaccines, should women have children? Should women be focused on the home? Things like that, like these questions that are controversial. Like, we're in that war already, and we need to train for that war, guys. We need to train for that war. So when I talk to my brother, and oftentimes when I'm going to make a controversial video, I'll call my brother and we'll kick it around a little bit, me and him, right? And it'll get animated sometimes, and sometimes we'll be get aggressive with each other with the points and counterpoints. And that, you know what that is, guys? That's practice. That's the training ground. Like, you can't go into a football game without a week of practice behind you, right? Like you don't send your kids out to war without teaching them and training them first, right? Like a military, an army practices, and they spar with each other, and sometimes sparks fly, and sometimes blood will run. Not mortal wounds, obviously, but things happen, right? And I don't see any reason why a Christian ought to stop that. We need to practice. I mean, it's just a Facebook group, right? So we're not going to get too upset about it, but a Facebook group is a good training ground. Like, we need to take advantage of that. There's a lot of members in that group, right? And what they need to learn, a lot of them, is how to fight, metaphorically speaking. How to fight. Stop keeping the peace. We need to practice with each other in a safe space where it's just us, right? Because we're in the war, the real war with the pagans, right? We're in that real culture war, whether we want to be or not. We're in it. We're in it. And we're bringing the gospel to bear on the culture. We're preaching that gospel, kicking down the gates of hell, and we don't expect that Satan's just going to be like, oh, come on in, guys. No, he's going to fight back. He's going to rage, and there's a war, a real war happening right now, and you're saying, well, let's go to war without training with each other. We got to keep the peace. Keeping the peace is a worthy goal in some situations, and in some situations, it's actually sin. There is no peace, oftentimes, especially when you're in a battle, when you're in a war. If you try to keep the peace with people you shouldn't be keeping the peace with, you're in sin. In fact, there's a great Bible verse where the prophet says, you're saying peace, peace, but there is no peace. You are lying. Keeping the peace is a worthy goal in some situations, and in other situations, it's really the wrong move. I'm not saying that the Reformed Pub is in sin for this. I'm saying that they've been brought up in such a way where basically avoiding a fight is like the prime directive. Let's avoid the fight, right? This is the same teaching that I grew up with. I know about it, guys. Like, this is how I know about it, because I grew up with this teaching. Anything to avoid a fight. This is the same teaching that looks down on in scorn with a street preacher who's out there sounding too aggressive. This is the same teaching that has led us to have to fight back to get people at the abortion mills. Like, that used to be more commonplace. And now, like, Apologia Church and these guys are struggling to get guys more interested in that kind of stuff. Like, it's that same teaching. Avoid a fight at all costs. Avoid a fight at all costs. This is the same teaching that is allowing critical theory, feminism, all this kind of stuff to run roughshod in our denominations. And you're wondering, well, where's the guys with the backbone, right? Well, the guys with the backbone are being trained to avoid fights and to keep the peace. That's where they are. That's where they are. I was talking to a brother the other day about a guy that he gave a great talk, and I heard it, and it was just awesome. I was listening to it, and I started going into his stuff, and he said, "Hey, that guy's a coward." And I said, "What? It doesn't seem like a coward." He goes, "No, he told me why he says this." And he says, he's the kind of guy that if you're in a foxhole together, you should shoot him first before you make the charge because he's going to get you in the back, right? And it was a hilarious joke. And I thought a lot about that. And I was thinking to myself, like, that wouldn't actually be right. That wouldn't actually be right because he's on our team. I don't think that this person was saying this guy was an unbeliever. I don't think that's what he was saying. But he was not suited for the role that he was in. Not every military guy is suited to be in a foxhole. Not every military person is suited to be in a pressure situation. Some guys are better snipers. Some guys are better, way behind the scenes where things aren't quite as high pressure, and they join the fight that way. Some guys are better medics, right? I mean, that's just how it is. Some people are going to be better at that kind of thing. But so that's the thing. Like, we got to understand there's different roles for different people. Just like in football, just like in World of Warcraft, there's different roles for different people. And let's stop treating them and acting as if they're on their other team. Let's not be the hand that says to the foot, "I don't need you." Let's not be the ear that says to the nose, "I don't need you." That's not how it is. That's not how it is, guys. Let's fight each other, but not betray each other. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? And so that's the real sad thing about this Facebook group situation with the Reform Pub. It's because it sends the wrong message that fighting and keeping the peace is the ultimate good, and fighting is to be avoided, especially when it gets too heated. I think that's topsy-turvy. That's upside down. That's contrary to what's true, especially in this situation. We ought to use these Facebook groups as a training ground. It's not the real fight. The real fight is not in Reform Pub. The real fight is out there. But we need to be ready to fight that real fight. Last point. The case that essentially is being made is that Doug Wilson is too polarizing. He's too polarizing, and that's the big problem. That's why people can't handle arguing about him. And the reality is this is a common thing that's said a lot of the time. Have you ever heard this, where people say it's not X or Y, it's somewhere in the middle. The truth lies somewhere in the middle. People love to say that stuff, right? And it's so often not even close to being true. The truth often doesn't lie in the middle. The truth is often very polarizing. I think we understand this as Christians, but for some reason it doesn't make it from our brains to our hearts, right? Like, we don't act like it is. The minute someone gets polarizing or says something too juicy or too spicy, we shriek back like gasp like a woman. Like, we're just shocked, and we want to keep the peace. That kind of thing. Polarizing can be a good thing, guys. Polarizing often is a good thing. Polarizing is often a very, very good thing. Christ was being very polarizing when he said, look, if you're not for us, you're against us. You're not for us. Rather, so it was, if you're not for me, you're against me. Right? If you're not on my side, you are against me. He who is not with me is against me. It's Matthew 12. It all comes from the same book. Isn't this interesting? Yeah, that's not very peaceful, right? Blessed are the peacemakers, I thought, right? But polarizing can be good, guys, and this will really bake your noodle, maybe. I don't know, and I'm not going to go into it because the episode's over. But not only can polarizing be good, oftentimes it is, but being moderate is often very bad. Being moderate otherwise known as lukewarm, can be very bad. On things that you shouldn't be moderate about, if you're moderate on it, you're in sin. I'm not talking politically, I'm talking scripturally, right? There are things that you need to be polarizing about. And that's that. That's just how we have to do it. But we've been taught that being moderate, being a mild-mannered, just sort of a lovely kind of man is the prime directive. And that's wrong. We need to get over that. We need to rediscover how to fight. There are different soldiers that'll fight in different ways, but everyone's got to fight. And we need to practice that fight in these spaces, like in the Reform pub, for example, where there's lots of people and things. When someone brings up, should women want to have children? This is a very basic Christian question, right? What is a woman for? Right? Basic Christian question. It gets too heated, so the admins ban it. That's wrong, because that question, you can't avoid the fight. The fight is going to happen. But what you're saying is, let's not practice that fight. I don't have time to moderate it, that fight. And I just don't see how that could be productive in any way. I really don't. One thing I'll do before we end, if you have not already, consider joining the Fight, Laugh, Feast Club. I can guarantee you there's one thing about the Fight, Laugh, Feast Club that'll never happen, is we will not avoid a fight at all costs. We will try to keep the peace, but not at all costs, because we understand that necessity of fighting. The necessity of fighting. If you're looking for a safe haven where you can actually kick these ideas around, these controversial ideas about birth control, marijuana, vaccines, we will talk about any of these things in our Facebook group, Fight, Laugh, Feast Family Party. Join it. This is not the real fight, right? This is in many ways this is a training ground, but not the real fight itself. But come on over. We'll do that with you. We'll do that with you. I can guarantee you, Doug Wilson's name is not banned there. I can guarantee you his name is not banned there. And all of those topics that are banned in the Reform Pub won't be banned here. It's still going to be moderated, by the way, so it's not going to be chaos, right? We're not going to have My Little Pony memes all over the place for an entire day. But we understand the value of fighting, and we understand that if you're going to fight, you got to train. Anyway, this episode has gone long. I'm going to end it right there. I hope you found it helpful. God bless. Don't forget to tune in next week on Thursday for AD on the Fight, Laugh, Feast Network.